In a dusty, forgotten town where justice swings from a noose, a farm girl's life hangs by a thread, until her Navy SEAL husband unleashes hell in 47 heart-pounding seconds. Dive into a tale of vengeance, love, and impossible odds that'll grip your soul and leave you breathless. Want more stories that hit like a sledgehammer? Subscribe now for raw, unfiltered narratives delivered straight to your inbox. In the scorched summer of 1932, in a nowhere town called Dusthaven, nestled in the cracked heart of the Oklahoma Panhandle, where the wind howled louder than the people and the sun baked dreams into ash, they hanged Ellie Mae Thornton from an old oak tree at the edge of the Miller farm, her bare feet dangling, her cotton dress fluttering like a surrender flag, her hazel eyes wide with defiance even as the rope bit into her neck, and the crowd, folks she'd known her whole life, neighbors who'd eaten her cornbread and borrowed her paw plow, stood silent, some sneering, some weeping, but none stepping forward to cut her down, because fear had turned their spines to dust and the man who'd ordered it, Sheriff Harlan Creed, stood with his Winchester cradled like a lover, his badge glinting like a devil's promise, and he'd called Ellie a traitor, a bootlegger's accomplice, a liar who'd shamed the town by hiding her husband's secrets nobody dared whisper, not since the whispers started about a man who wasn't just a farmer but something else, something forged in war and shadow. And as the rope creaked and Ellie's breaths grew shallow, the townsfolk believed it was over, that justice, or whatever twisted version Harlan peddled, had won, but they couldn't know, that 47 seconds later, the air would split with the sound of vengeance, because Ellie's husband, Jack Thornton, wasn't just a farmer, wasn't just the quiet man who'd tilled their land and kissed her under the stars, but a Navy SEAL, a ghost trained to kill in ways that made death seem like mercy, and he was coming, his boots pounding the dirt 2 miles out, his M1911 pistol strapped to his chest, his heart a furnace of rage, because he'd been away, called back to some classified mission in the Pacific, leaving Ellie alone to face Harlan's lies that painted her as the mastermind of a moonshine ring when all she'd done was love a man who'd seen too much, and Jack had heard the news from a telegraph in San Diego, the words, Ellie arrested, trial tomorrow, burning into his brain, and he'd stolen a biplane, flown it till the engine screamed, landed in a wheat field at dawn, and now, as the rope tightened and the crowd held its breath, he was close, so close, his sniper's eyes scanning the ridge, counting the men, 6 deputies with rifles, Harlan with his Winchester, and the townsfolk, maybe 30, scattered like sheep, and he knew he had seconds, not minutes, because Ellie's lips were turning blue, her body jerking against the knot, and Jack, who'd crawled through jungles, slit throats in the dark, and swam through shark-infested waters, felt something he hadn't felt since his first kill, fear, raw and clawing, not for himself but for her, the girl who'd patched his wounds, who'd laughed at his bad jokes, who'd promised to wait no matter how long the Navy took him, and he'd promised her safety, promised her a life beyond the dirt and the drought, but now she was dying, and he was late, so he moved, silent as death, slipping through the tall grass, his knife already in hand, and the first deputy didn't see him, didn't hear the blade whistle before it found his throat, dropping him like a sack of flour, and the second turned too late, Jack's fist cracking his jaw, sending him to the dirt, and now the crowd stirred, murmurs rising, because something was wrong, Harlan's head snapping left, then right, his Winchester rising, but Jack was a shadow, already at the tree, his knife slicing the rope in one clean cut, and Ellie fell, gasping, into his arms, her pulse faint but there, and the crowd screamed, some running, some frozen, as Harlan roared, shoot him. And bullets tore through the air, but Jack was moving, rolling Ellie behind the oak, his pistol barking, 2 shots, 2 deputies down, their rifles clattering, and Harlan, red-faced, fired wild, splintering the tree, but Jack was trained for this, trained to see the world in angles and seconds, and he saw Harlan's mistake, saw the gap in his stance, and he fired once, clean through the sheriff's shoulder, the Winchester falling, Harlan screaming, and Jack didn't stop, didn't pause, because there were still 3 deputies, and one had a bead on him, but Jack was faster, diving, firing, the deputy's hat spinning off as he crumpled, and now the townsfolk were running, scattering like roaches, because this wasn't their fight anymore, this was a reckoning, and Jack knelt by Ellie, her eyes fluttering open, her voice a rasp, you came, and he wanted to hold her, to cry, but there was no time, because Harlan, bleeding, was crawling for his gun, and Jack saw it, saw the glint of madness in the man's eyes, and he knew this wasn't just about moonshine or lies, this was personal, because Harlan had loved Ellie once, years ago, before Jack, before the war, and rejection had festered into hate, and Jack realized, as he stood, pistol steady, that Harlan had framed her, had twisted the town against her, because he couldn't have her, and now, as Harlan's fingers closed on the Winchester, Jack fired, not to wound but to end, and Harlan slumped, eyes wide, done, and the last 2 deputies threw down their guns, hands up, begging, but Jack ignored them, scooping Ellie into his arms, her breath weak but steady, and he carried her through the dust, past the crowd, past the tree, toward the truck he'd stolen from a barn a mile back, and as he drove, Ellie's head against his chest, he whispered, "No one's gonna hurt you again," but the twist came then, because Ellie, coughing, whispered back, "It wasn't just Harlan," and Jack's blood ran cold, because she told him, in broken gasps, about the telegram she'd found in Harlan's office, the one from a man in Washington, someone high up, someone who knew Jack, knew his missions, his kills, and wanted him dead, wanted Ellie gone to draw him out, and this wasn't just a small-town lynching, it was a trap, a chess move in a game Jack didn't know he was playing, and as the truck roared toward the horizon, he saw dust rising behind them, 3 black cars, government plates, gaining fast, and Ellie, barely conscious, gripped his hand, and Jack knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, because whoever was behind this had power, reach, and a reason to want a seal erased, and as the cars closed in, machine guns glinting in the sun, Jack floored the gas, his mind racing, because he'd saved her in 47 seconds, but saving them both would take a miracle, and miracles, he knew, were just plans you hadn't made yet, so he turned the wheel, veering off the road, toward the canyons, where a seal could vanish, could fight, could turn hunters into prey, and as Ellie clung to him, he swore he'd burn the world before he let them take her again, because love, he'd learned, was stronger than war, fiercer than death, and Jack Thornton was just getting started.